Chicago's Gold Coast burned softly under the late evening glow, the kind of hour when the city's elite pretended they were untouchable. Inside Lejma, the underworld's favorite sanctuary disguised as fine dining, the air carried a quiet tension beneath the clink of silver and the low murmur of men who believed they owned the night. At the center of it all moved Maria Puglisi, a waitress by appearance only. Her posture was small enough to disappear, but her eyes, sharp, deliberate, caught every shift in the room. She felt the imbalance the moment it happened. A chair scraping too hard, a voice rising a shade too loud, the subtle recoil of patrons who recognized danger before they understood it. When Vincent Greco, patriarch of the city's most feared family, snapped his fingers at her, the false civility cracked. His hand clamped around her wrist with the casual entitlement of a man who'd never been told no. "Look at me when I talk to you," he growled. Maria's voice was steady, almost gentle. "Release me, sir. That's your only warning." The room shifted. Power tilted. And in that breathless pause, everyone knew the night had just crossed a line it could never return from. What happens next? 4 more stories where truth cuts through power. Like the video and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales. The moment Vincent Greco tightened his grip, the room at Lejma shifted into a different reality. Guests who had spent the evening pretending to be civilized suddenly remembered the truth. This was not a restaurant. It was a battlefield polishing its silverware. The chandeliers hummed softly overhead, casting warm light over men whose hearts ran cold. Maria felt that shift deep in her bones, yet her breath stayed steady, her eyes sharp. When she pulled her wrist free, Vincent's surprise was almost comical. No one had defied him in years, certainly not a waitress with a worn apron and quiet steps. He leaned closer, his voice low enough that only the nearest tables caught it. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Maria didn't step back. "Sir," she said, her tone even, "there are mistakes and then there are warnings. Consider this the second one." The nearby diners froze. The maitre d' pretended to polish glasses to hide his horror. A young couple near the bar gripped each other's hands under the table. In a place like Lejma, confrontation meant trouble, and trouble meant blood. Everyone knew that equation. Everyone except the man provoking it. Vincent rose halfway from his chair, adrenaline brightening the red already staining his cheeks. His son, Ethan Greco, placed a hand on his father's shoulder as if steadying him, though the gesture carried more calculation than care. Ethan was sharp-featured, well-tailored, and unmistakably dangerous, the kind of man who spoke softly because he knew violence would speak louder for him if needed. "Sit down," Ethan murmured. "You're drawing attention." "Let them look," Vincent hissed. "They should see what happens when disrespect walks upright." Maria stood still, refusing to move until he released the moment. Her quiet courage, her refusal to shrink, unsettled the younger diners. They weren't accustomed to watching someone stare down power and remain whole. She turned and walked toward the kitchen doors, but Vincent's voice, booming, acidic, followed her. "You're lucky I don't have you thrown out on the street tonight." The room tensed. Maria paused, not because she feared him, but because there were some lines she would not allow him to redraw. She turned back slightly. "I finish my work," she said softly. "After that, you no longer exist to me." It was the kind of line that didn't raise voices but raised stakes. That was when the first real crack appeared, not in Maria's resolve but in Ethan's expression. He watched her walk away, his sharp eyes narrowing, as if trying to decode something hidden beneath her calm exterior. Something he recognized but couldn't name. The kitchen swallowed her into its stainless steel calm, but her heartbeat stayed tethered to the tension rising in the dining room. She had endured worse than raised voices. Worse than men with swollen egos and inherited power. But tonight felt different. Tonight she sensed a thread pulling tight, drawing her toward a truth she had spent years preparing to face. Her co-worker, Elena, met her at the counter. "Are you okay?" "I will be." Maria gathered plates, her hands steady. "But the night isn't over yet." Elena's voice dropped. "Be careful." That family. They don't forgive embarrassment. Maria didn't answer. She didn't need to. The weight in her eyes said she understood exactly who they were, and who she was. When she returned to the dining room with a tray balanced in one hand, the air felt electrically charged. Vincent, emboldened by wine and wounded pride, pointed at her as if commanding the room. "There she is," he announced loudly. "The little worker who thinks she's above her station." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Father, enough." But Vincent continued, louder, crueler. "Women like her should remember their place." That sentence fractured something. Not just in Maria, who had heard far worse, but in the guests who watched, their discomfort turning to disgust. The power imbalance was too stark, too ugly, even for a room accustomed to quiet corruption. Maria set the tray down gently, then straightened, not out of pride but out of principle. Her voice was controlled, quiet enough that their table had to lean forward to hear. "My place," she said, "is wherever I choose to stand. And yours, Mr. Greco, is slipping." A murmur rippled across the room. Vincent surged to his feet, rage replacing reason. But before he could strike, Ethan caught his arm, not protectively but decisively. "That's enough," Ethan said, and there was steel in it. "You're drunk. I'm your father. And you're embarrassing us." The silence that followed was suffocating. Maria refused to look away from either of them. The truth was simple. Men like Vincent burned through their power until their flames consumed their own bloodline. Ethan wasn't protecting her. He was protecting the image his father was shredding. Vincent pulled free, seething. "I want her fired. Tonight." Maria blinked once, slowly. "You don't own me. I own this entire street." Vincent roared. "No," Ethan corrected calmly. "You used to." Another fracture. Another shift. Maria watched Ethan carefully now. He was dangerous, but not his father's kind of dangerous. His threat lived beneath the surface, calculating, cold, wearing control like a suit. Manager Paul hurried over, desperate to keep the peace, but Vincent seized him by the collar. "She's out," Vincent said. "Or you are." Paul stammered, "Mr. Greco, please." Maria stepped forward before Paul collapsed under the weight of fear. "If someone must leave," she said, "it won't be me." Her words struck with clarity, as if slicing the room open. She had no weapon but truth, and enough people saw it to make it matter. Vincent laughed, a bitter, snapping sound, and raised his hand, the same gesture that had ended countless arguments through force. But this time Maria caught his wrist midair. Her grip was firm, controlled, unshakable. Gasps broke across the restaurant. Even Ethan's mask slipped. Vincent tried to yank free, but she held him steady, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've hurt people for years because you mistook fear for respect. You won't hurt me." He sputtered. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "I do," she answered. "I just don't care." And for the first time in decades, Vincent felt powerless. His face twisted. "I'll destroy you." Ethan stood then, not to defend her, but because something in his father's unraveling struck a nerve. This wasn't loyalty anymore. It was humiliation. "Father," Ethan warned, "stop before you ruin everything." Vincent shoved him. Hard. And in that instant, Lejma witnessed a strange inversion of power. The feared patriarch turning on the son who had protected him for years, exposing his own rot. Ethan steadied himself, breath sharp, eyes dark. "You crossed a line." Vincent snarled. "You're weak." "No," Ethan said, stepping closer to Maria instead of his father. "I'm done." That moment, one man crumbling, the other stepping into clarity, hung suspended like a verdict. Vincent lunged, but Ethan's reflexes were faster, sharper, built from years of training he once believed would make him worthy of inheriting a legacy he now saw as poisoned. He caught his father's wrist, twisted, and pressed him face down onto the table with controlled precision. Guests rose from their seats, stunned. Paul whispered, "Oh my God!" Vincent roared in humiliation, But Ethan didn't release him. "This ends tonight," Ethan said, his voice low but resonant. "You've terrorized this city, this staff, this family long enough. I'm not covering your sins anymore." Maria stayed still, watching the truth unfold without triumph, only inevitability. Vincent spat curses until security arrived. Ethan signaled them with a subtle nod. "Escort him out," Ethan ordered, "and contact the authorities. All of them." Shock hit the room like a wave. Vincent's eyes widened. "You wouldn't dare." "I would," Ethan replied. "You've left a trail of damage long enough to bury us all. But you'll face it alone." Vincent was dragged through the dining room, shouting, pleading, bargaining, every stage of a fallen tyrant realizing he had no audience left. As the doors shut behind him, a deep silence followed. Not fear. Relief. Maria met Ethan's gaze. "You didn't do it for me." "No," he admitted. "I did it because someone finally forced me to see the truth." She nodded once. "Then maybe something good will grow from tonight." Ethan exhaled slowly, as if for the first time in years. "It already has." But Maria didn't stay to savor the aftermath. She returned to the counter, folded her apron, and placed it down with quiet purpose. As she walked toward the exit, guests parted instinctively, not out of fear, but respect. Behind her, Ethan watched his father's empire begin to collapse under the weight of long-overdue consequences. Vincent Greco would face the law, face the victims, face the world he had built without mercy. And for the first time, justice didn't whisper, roared. When the doors of Lejma finally closed behind her, Maria stepped into the cool Chicago night and felt a stillness she hadn't known in years. The street was quiet, washed in the soft glow of passing headlights, but inside her chest something deeper shifted, an old weight releasing its grip. She hadn't planned to reshape a family built on fear, yet the truth she carried had done exactly that. Ethan would face the fallout of a legacy collapsing at his feet. Vincent would learn what it meant to stand alone. And Maria, for the first time, walked forward without looking over her shoulder. She didn't celebrate. She didn't need to. Strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it was simply choosing not to surrender. Tonight proved that even the smallest act of defiance could bend the course of power, and that clarity could rise from a life spent in the shadows. As she reached the corner, a breeze lifted the loose strands of her hair, carrying away the last traces of a past she refused to inherit. In the reflection of a darkened storefront, she saw not a server in a borrowed apron, but a woman stepping into her own story. And somewhere behind her, Lejma stood silent, a reminder that truth, once spoken aloud, never goes back to sleep. If this story moved you, please like, share, and help Canada's Heartfelt Tales grow by subscribing to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.